So we know about the security conference in Munich, Germany, about the United States saying that they were not going to post American troops in Ukraine, that it's a European issue, that if Russia were to attack those troops, it will not invoke Article 5 in the NATO Charter, that the United States will not get involved. This is strictly a European problem. And there's definitely a lot to be said that, and I've said this many times, is that there's no strategic interest in Ukraine that should interest the United States. The rest of the world outside of the United States, and we have it in the United States here too, but the rest of the world is plagued by tribalism. And of course, you've studied history, the borders move around. And this was the case, until really after World War II. After World War II, you don't see too much borders moving around like you did prior to World War II. And that's because the United States acted like the policemen of the world for the most part. I mean, obviously, you have the case in like South Sudan, or you have the case in Yemen, but those are the exceptions to the rules. You don't see any massive shift in borders, largely since the collapse of the Soviet Union, collapse of Yugoslavia. But anyway, all that aside, with regard to NATO, the United States shouldn't even be involved in NATO. It's been said that NATO is an institution that defends freedom. But let's take a look at Western Europe. I made a video about this yesterday. They say that Germany is, liberal democracy. They're implying that Germany is a free country. Germany is arresting people and sending people to jail for their speech, so quote unquote hate speech. So certainly they don't have freedom of speech and they don't have the right to bear arms. Is this really a free country? Obviously not. Germany is not a free country, not to mention all their economic controls and their quote unquote welfare program, which has enticed a lot of migrants to settle in Germany. But Germany is not a free country. You look at the UK. You look at, case in point, Tommy Robinson. Is the UK a free country? I mean, historically, you can make that argument. Certainly, they have, this is what we get, British common law, and, you have certain rights. You're presumed innocent until proven guilty. That came out of the British tradition. But today's Britain is not acting like a free country. You look at the crime rate in London. You look at France, and which I've made a video, which I haven't posted yet, of the censorship of a television station. They didn't like the speech, so they pulled their broadcasting license under silly terms. It's a silly argument because the company wasn't profitable, so they pulled. Really, they didn't like what they were saying, so they canceled them essentially. So we're protecting countries that are not free. Not to say that Ukraine's not a free country. Now, obviously, Russia is by no means perfect. Russia's not a free country by any stretch, but Russia, in many respects, is more of a free country than Ukraine is. Zelensky is a dictator. The secret police in Ukraine is quite oppressive to anybody who voices their opinion against Zelensky. You look at journalist Gonzalo Lira, I'm sorry if I butchered his name, Coach Red Pill. He was tortured and murdered by our quote-unquote buddy in Ukraine. Again, so you have to ask yourself, this NATO, it's not a defender of freedom. It's a body of force. It's an arm. It's an enforcement arm of globalism is what it really is. Again, I'm not saying Russia is a perfect country. Certainly, it is not a free country. It's on par with countries like Turkey, like the way Germany's getting, like South Korea. South Korea is not a free country either. You don't have freedom of speech in South Korea. Turkey is about on par with Russia. Actually, Russia is more of a free country than Saudi Arabia is. Saudi Arabia is supposedly our ally, right? So if you look at it this way, obviously it's not consistent. U.S. foreign policy isn't about, or at least under Biden and under the globalists, is certainly not about promoting freedom. It's about promoting globalism. It's about promoting elitism under the guise, under the implication that they're defending freedom. So anyway, yeah, get rid of NATO completely. Of course, you know, the previous institutions like our Congress made it so that it's almost impossible to do under the Trump presidency, because they made it like a 2/3 Senate vote, I think. So we can't easily get out of NATO, but we can certainly pull out of NATO in other ways, or at least rearrange NATO to make it function better, so that maybe it can be a force for good, a force for freedom. Of course, these European countries, Canada, functionally, they're sliding into tyranny. They're becoming a less and less free countries. Morally, arguably, they're not any better than Russia the way they're going. So I say get rid of NATO, allow these European countries to rearm themselves and become the countries they used to be. And actually, you would implement common sense in these countries, so they don't go off onto the nihilistic, wayward. Anyway, that's my thoughts on NATO. I say get rid of it, or at the least you can rearrange NATO into something that functions a lot better. So that's my thoughts on that.